The reason PTB has a lot to talk about, and most of it is really good. The killer is amazing, but one thing that is not getting nearly enough attention is the new surrender mechanic. Now, we actually tested it out ourselves on the PTB, and once you see for yourself how this mechanic actually works, you'll realize it's going to cause some big problems, mostly due to the lazy or at least short-sighted way in which it was implemented. Now, real quick to catch you up, in the patch notes when it comes to Survivor, you're able to surrender in two scenarios. The first is if all of your teammates quit and you are the last non-bot player on the team. And the second scenario is when all survivors are in the dying state. Behavior also says that when you surrender, you will keep some progress, specifically your blood points, match XP, challenge progress, and emblem scores, but you will still lose any item or add-ons that you have. Now, when I originally envisioned this mechanic, I thought it would work something like a voting system, right? Everyone still alive on the team has to decide if they want to concede or continue the match. However, that's not what happens at all. Behavior went about this in the laziest way possible. So let me explain. Surrendering isn't really a new mechanic. Instead, it now just lets you DC without a penalty if the right conditions are met, meaning a bot replaces you when you surrender, but the match continues on. Now, this might seem harmless at first glance, but the way this was implemented is literally going to change how DBD is played forever from this point on, and in my opinion, not in a good way. Go down, and then I want to see if I can, like, we can surrender while some people are slugged and other people are hooked, basically. Surrender. So you just basically free DC. I can't spectate. Does it let you guys surrender? It lets you surrender. So it lets you surrender on hook. On hook. Wow. Wow. That's not good, guys. They set this up in the laziest way they possibly could have. Yeah, you could literally just free DC against Legion. Surrendered. You sure you didn't just accidentally DC? No. It was very different. When you go to DC, they changed it now to where it says abandon, and it gives you this big warning of all the things you're gonna lose if you DC. When you surrender, in the top right corner, you'll see, if you rewind it, it literally pops up on your screen without even hitting pause. It says press the start button to surrender. You press start, and the abandon button is now replaced with a button that says surrender, and then you can surrender and there's no penalty at all. How did they mess up this system exactly? So it's a punishment for the killer now. They made it to where you, as the killer, if you, even in every situation, I think that's a bug, because I'm not supposed to lose my blood points. In every single situation, the survivors can DC now, no matter what. If the killer ever is about to win a match, the survivors can DC. You can never be endgame worried again. You can never, like, if the match is over, you just leave. It's pretty crazy. I don't know how they were this short-sighted, in all honesty. I don't get it. It's actually worse than I would have expected. So let me break down the issues here. First of all, hearing that you can surrender when all the survivors are in the dying state is very misleading. It paints a picture of all 4 survivors being slugged and bled out, and then the option to surrender appears on the screen and brings the match to a quick end if everyone, votes for it, sparing everyone in the lobby a boring sentence of laying on the ground for 4 minutes bleeding out. However, the dying state, as they call it, counts as being slugged, being carried, or even being on a hook, meaning that survivors can now DC the instant they lose any match ever. And let me explain why that's bad for killer players, and also why it's arguably even worse for survivor players. Starting with killer, this means that there's basically never going to be another match of DBD where the killer really wins. That's because nearly every match is going to end in a surrender, because the survivors are just going to DC the second that checkmate moment happens, right? Here's an example. There's proof of it too. This isn't just me doomsdaying. It's very observable in any game that functions in a similar way. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a perfect example. As soon as one of the main objectives gets completed, the family will usually DC instantly, and on the survivor side, they DC the second they're about to die, or even when they're in an unwinnable situation. The rewards also work the same way in TCM. You keep all your XP up until the point that you quit, so there's zero incentive to play out a match to the bitter end. As soon as you know you've lost, you may as well go to the next game. That's the mentality that most players have. And if you don't think that will translate to DVD players, you're kidding yourself. Now, I don't know how everyone feels about that exactly, but I truly hate it. It feels very cheap and it just degrades the entire game. Like, imagine if the killer was allowed to surrender or DC the second the last gen popped. That would be pretty annoying, right? At least I think so. Another huge issue though is that the killer can surrender now themselves if a generator hasn't been completed for 10 minutes, meaning behavior is unknowingly encouraging survivors to rat and hide for 10 minutes in order to get the killer to surrender, which is basically just them quitting from being bored and literally giving the survivors an undeserved free win for hiding. Like, legit, one of the worst aspects of DBD is being incentivized here, and it's potentially going to be a very big problem. However, Behavior has said that they have a new anti-hiding mechanic, but we haven't been able to test this yet, and it's very possible that it's easy to bypass with, picking up and dropping an item or something else. So the jury is still completely out on that. With that said, let me explain why this is arguably even worse for survivors, specifically solo queue. Since this surrender mechanic is available the second everyone is in the dying state, that means if, say for example, you have Unbreakable but your entire team gets slugged, your teammates can now instantly DC before you have a chance to reset the match. And there's a lot of similar scenarios like that. Deliverance, Kobeing off hooks, Soul Guard, etc., right? The game might not be over, but your teammates are free to leave with no penalty the second you get into hot water, leaving you with a team of bots. Also, if we go back to the killer being able to surrender after 10 minutes of no gens being completed, that opens the door for killers to be able to hold a 3-gen for 10 minutes, which is really not hard with the right setup. And if at some point the killer is losing that battle, maybe the anti-3-gen kicks in and blocks the gens from further regression, the killer can now surrender before one of the gens pops. So essentially, if they realize they're not going to be able to win with the 3-gen situation, they could just cancel the match for everybody by DCing for free. So with killer, it's more of an annoying problem, but with survivors, it's an actual tangible problem. Overall, you see how the laziness, or alternatively maybe short-sightedness, of how this was implemented is going to cause just a lot of unnecessary problems. And again, it feels like this is going to really cheapen the overall feel of Dead by Daylight. So let me offer a better alternative here. It's really simple actually. Make surrendering a voting system where every survivor left alive in the lobby has to agree to surrender, and when that surrender happens, it triggers the endgame Mori cutscene and the killer gets all of the blood points that they were sort of robbed of because of the surrender. This is a win-win for every player involved. The survivors actually lose the game as opposed to just rage quitting without a penalty. The survivors have to agree to surrender as a team, meaning the game is actually over and nobody has an ace up their sleeve to play. In addition to that, the hiding for 10 minutes without completing a generator surrender should be changed to no gens have been touched for 10 minutes. And now will trigger the endgame Mori. The killer will then win and the survivors will lose, as it should be. Also, even in a situation where all the survivors DC, this will allow the killer to DC against a team of bots without losing the match as well, which would be nice and also fair. If it's not obvious, this removes that 3-gen scenario as well. If you look back, one of the main reasons that the original endgame Mori was not implemented back in the day was because of little things like slug races at the exit gate, trying to give the hatch to the last survivor, or even like a scenario where someone has Unbreakable but the endgame Mori automatically triggered before they could use it. So with a voting system, all of these issues are negated and the endgame Mori will not delete the fun pastimes of the game. So this really is the direction behavior should go in with the whole surrender mechanic. If you don't agree now, I understand, but give it a few months and you'll really start seeing the cracks here. That's why it would be best to just get ahead of all of it and implement the system system in a more future-proofed way. But that's all I have to say on it for today. I literally didn't see anyone else bringing up these flaws, and I am genuinely concerned how poorly this system will affect the game over time if it goes to live how it is right now. That said, I am curious what you all think. Are there more issues with it that I didn't even consider? Let us all know. And as always, thanks for watching and have a good one.